Okay, it's time for the potentially much anticipated or indeed much forgotten video that I said that I was going to do. A video about the theology of well, essentially it's the theology of the Second Age and going into the Third Age, but why the theology element impacts on the storytelling and why the storytelling that Rings of Power has done with their first season is actually a real travesty to what Tolkien intended. So, as you may remember, we've been going on the basis of the only material they have officially to go on is Appendix B from Return of the King, and that covers the Second Age and also the Third Age, doing basically a timeline of key events. So for the Second Age, they've only really got just over 2 pages worth of material that they can go on. But we also know from the way that they've created it that they're actually using material that's outside of this this basic framework with the appendices. So we can take it that they're at least taking a lead from the creation that Tolkien has outside of this particular set of appendices, and so they will have hopefully at least borne things like the Silmarillion in mind. So the material that we have with the Silmarillion, if I just get that out, we have with the Akallabeth. So within the Silmarillion, the Akallabeth is well, it is the start of what we see about the Second Age, because they have 2 elements. You've got the Akallabeth, and then we have of the Rings of Power and the Third Age, which covers the Second and obviously Third Age. But the Akallabeth is all about the Númenóreans. And so the details that you can get from the Númenórean outline there is pretty substantive. The other thing you can do, and it's a fantastic recent edition, is The Fall of Númenor. Its official title, I think, is in most places, even though this book has The Fall of Númenor as the only title on the front, is The Fall of Númenor and the Second Age. Ah, yes, here we go. On the inside, The Fall of Númenor and Other Tales from the Second Age of Middle-earth. So there's lots of material out there that the writers of the Rings of Power could have gone to get a much better idea of how to frame the Second Age as they're creating it, rather than effectively saying, we're going to jump right to the end and create all of our stories from that, completely messing up all of the timelines. Now, why is that important? Why is the timeline that Tolkien created actually an important one? Well, for this, we need to go to some graphs that I have created. So, as you'll see now on the screen, there is a graph which shows the ages of the kings of Númenor, every single, well, not just kings, but the rulers of Númenor, going all the way from Elros at the start, so Elrond's brother, all the way through to Pharazôn at the end. What you see from this graph is that there is obviously the age of Elros. He's significantly longer lived than all the others of the kings. He lived to be 500. But then you see for quite a long way there is roughly a 400 age limit that they're hitting each time when it comes to the age of the kings at the point at which they die. However, you will notice when we get to Telemate, I believe, assuming that it didn't get added, changed around a bit or whatever with spell check, you start to see the dip around about there at 390, and it just keeps on going down and down and down. There's only one time when it actually goes back up again, and even then it's only slight, and that's the penultimate king, Palantir. So you can see that there is a reduction by about 200 years in length from the second ruler of Numenor, all the way through to the last of them. So why is this important? Okay, well, I'm going to have to show you another graph now. So have a look at this one. This is taken from the information that we have in the Old Testament. If you go through the book of Genesis and you have a look at the ages of all of the patriarchs through from Adam all the way up to Jacob, we get to see just how old each of them were at the point at which they died, according to the Bible. I would like to point out, yes, I am a Christian. I'm one of these Christians that also believes the Bible to be completely accurate on one of these things, but this is irrelevant, because the whole point is the story that the Bible is telling, whether you accept it as 100% factual or whether you accept it as being just a story, a mythology story. And you could take that, some Christians do believe this to be kind of the Christian mythology leading up to the eventual start of the interactions of God with Abraham and going on from there. But whatever way you take it, the fact, however you take it, is irrelevant to the fact that this is something that has influenced Tolkien. We know he was very much a convicted Christian. He was a member of the Roman Catholic Church, and so this would have heavily influenced the way that he was writing with all of this. And we can see there is a point at which we have roughly the same ages. Yes, there's a few spikes, and you can see the red one there, which is Enoch. This is because the Bible says he was taken away. He lived however many years it was, and then God took him away. So just so that you're aware, the red is always, except there'll be a few of these graphs. The red is showing that this is someone who died, or in Enoch's case was simply removed from the world before their time was due. So all the purple ones you can see: Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Methuselah, Lamech, and you can see Lamech is actually quite a short-lived guy comparatively. He's less than 800 years, whereas everyone else is around the 900-year mark, if not a bit higher. But what we see after that is, you'll see Shem is marked in blue. This is marking he is a post-flood person within the Bible story. And from after the flood, we then also see a significant reduction in the ages. We have a few that seem to be look like they're going back up a bit above 400, and then you drop down below 200, and that's where it stays all the way through to Jacob, who dies at the age of 147. So what's all this got to do with the whole creation of Tolkien? Well, the point is, for starters, when you see the creation story in Genesis and how it refers to all the things that are going on, whilst it does talk about only basic stuff, funnily enough, kind of what we see in most of Tolkien's writings, so style-wise it's not too dissimilar, we also see that the world around these people, these descendants of Adam, the world around them is getting progressively worse and worse. And the story that we see throughout the Akallabeth is Numenor starts off as this wonderful place for the Numenorians, the Dunedain, to live, and it gets worse as time goes on, as they start to fall away from the ideals that were placed upon them when they were originally placed on Numenor. So there's an age drop as a result of falling away from the ideal. Now, I know we don't see that with this Bible one, but we do see it in the post-flood. There are various reasons people give for this. I'm not interested in any of the scientific reasons, any of the theological reasons, or anything like this. I'm wanting to look at the connection between this and Tolkien's writing, because if we have a look at this next graph next graph that we have, this is the kings of Gondor. And you'll see that if you have a look at the age that's on the side, or indeed what you see at the top with the numbers, you'll see they're all below 300. And slowly but surely they're drifting towards the 200. Obviously there are the red ones that show that people were killed in battle. But if you follow the line through, the kings of Gondor are slowly petering away. They're slowly petering away. All of this is post-flood, effectively. This is post-Numenor being brought crashing down, the world made round, and all the stuff that goes on towards the end of the Second Age. But this is showing a significant drop-off in the ages of the kings of Gondor. So this is again an element of Tolkien's writing that he's basing off, I believe, basing off a biblical influence of saying how the flood in the Old Testament and the flooding or the destruction of Numenor, he's tying them together in terms of the impact that they have on the people of the respective Earths. If we have a look at this next graph, this one's even more stark. And this is the kings of, if I remember rightly, this is the kings of both Arnor and then Arthedain, when Arnor splits into three kingdoms. And you can see here again, there is a significant drop. You've got Elendil, who's 322. That's the very first one, obviously killed in the battle with Sauron at the end of the Second Age. Then Isildur dies. And there's a little bit of an uptick then for his younger son, Valandil. But that slowly progresses down until you're eventually, again, below the 200 mark. 175 being the last king that lives all the way into old age and doesn't get killed before his time. And then we have this next graph, which is the heads of the Rangers, the chieftains of the Rangers. So the descendants of the kings of Arnor and Arthedain, which eventually leads to Aragorn. We're seeing them averaging around about the 150 mark. So the last king of Gondor was only a little bit after the last king of Arthedain, but the chieftains of the Dunedain, the chieftains of the Rangers, they carry on going, and you can see that apart from Aragorn and Eldarion right at the end, which obviously is when we have the return to the reunited kingdom of the Dunedain lands. We've got this average of 150 all the way back in the start of the Second Age. The second longest, the second king of Numenor is living 400. And now we're at 150. How far the Dunedain have fallen? How far Numenorians have fallen from being this long-lived people. They live for well, certainly the monarchy lived for 400 years, and the non-monarchy would have been living for, I would imagine, 200 to 300 years of age, because it does say that the rulers had a slightly elongated lifespan to the rest of the Dunedain because they were descended from Eärendil and therefore of elven blood and so on. So the whole way that we're seeing Tolkien portraying this is you fall away from perfection, you fall away from the ideal that's created, and life is reduced. Now, you could take that as being just a literal longevity of life, but you could also look at this as a life is restricted, and that could be a quality thing, potentially as an allegory as well. But either way, we've got this this clear line that shows that Tolkien was trying to point towards an idea of the impact on life and the life length that the rulers had, as a connection between his world and his theological understanding of the Old Testament. And if we have a look, just as a nice clear way of showing this, here's one final graph to go for. And you can see here, this is all the way from Elros at the start. Elros is in blue in this, and you've then got all of the kings of Numenor, all the way to the first of the three reds that are together. So you've got Pharazôn dying, Elendil dying, and Isildur dying. And then the next one, the blue one, he's the first kind of official king of just Gondor. Sorry, not Gondor, Arnor, Valandil, Isildur's youngest son. And we go through up until, what was it? Amiath, I think it was. But the next blue one is marking the changeover from Arnor to Arthedain. And then we have coming to Arvedui. No, not Arvedui. It was Amarth, I think. Unfortunately, the image is a little bit blurry because it's got such a wide bit. So looking at it, I can't quite tell. I have to have a look in more detail somewhere else to get it. But you can find it in the books as to all the names. But this king, he's no longer the king. He's the son of the former king of Arthedain, and he then becomes the first chieftain of the Rangers. And you see all the way through, right up until Aragorn's great grandfather. You see this progression of long life. There's a sudden dip, and then there's just this progressive reduction in age. And it has its similarities. If you remember back to that image of the patriarchs in the Bible and their age reduction, it has this similarity to the way that things are reduced in, or the ages are reduced in that. So that's the first thing I want to say. And as I said, one of the reasons why this is important, and probably the biggest reason, is it's pointing towards this idea of we're no longer in perfection, we're no longer in paradise. Let's see, the words they actually use at the start of the Akalabeth is talking about the whole point of Numenor. So they talk about the final ending of the War of Wrath. They talk about the reward for the Edain, and they then talk about, it says, to the fathers of men of the three faithful houses, rich reward also was given. Eonwe came among them and taught them, and they were given wisdom and power and life more enduring than any others of mortal race have possessed. A land was made for the Edain to dwell in, neither part of Middle-earth nor of Valinor, for it was sundered from either by a wide sea, yet it was nearer to Valinor. So it's nearer to heaven. The basic premise of heaven is given as Valinor, the land where the elves can sail off to. It was raised by Osse out of the depths of the great water, and it was established by Aule and enriched by Yavanna. And the Eldar brought thither flowers and fountains out of Tol Eressë. That land the Valar called Andor, the land of gift. And the star of Eärendil shone bright in the west as a token that all was made ready, and as a guide over the sea. And men marvelled to see that silver flame in the paths of the sun. So this is a blessed land. This has been blessed by the angelic creatures, the Valar, Aule is the great crafter. He's the creator of the dwarves. Yavanna is the effectively the goddess of life and creation, kind of thing. So she will have help for the land to be good, to grow things from. The elves have brought some of the best flora to come and make the land a beautiful land to live in. This is the closest you get to a Garden of Eden story being put into Middle Earth. Numenor is this Garden of Eden created for the Dunedain to be able to thrive as a thank you for the help that they gave to the elves, for the fact that they stuck with the elves and fought with them against Morgoth. And so we go from this perfection to a rebellion against the Valar, which we'll come to in a minute. And as they rebel, you see that sudden decline with the age of the kings reducing from averaging 400 to now dropping down to 200 by the end. And so that whole tearing themselves away from the Valar, no longer following the plans of Ilúvatar, this is what brings them down. This is what tears them away. And in the same way, from what we see in the Bible, the whole idea is that the more that that humans go away from the original plan that God had in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, the more they go away from it, the Bible is basically saying the more they go away, the lesser they become. They start off being able to live 900 years, but actually as things get worse, there is that reduction. And then you have the addition of the flood in the Bible, the destruction of Numenor, and therefore leaving Eden, leaving this perfect place that they had made less perfect by their actions. You then see even more of a reduction in their span of life. So that's the first thing that I wanted to point to. This whole thing of how the time span is important. And why it's important to Rings of Power is because we've missed all of that. Where we are right now, or where we were when we started the very beginning of this season, the first interaction we had with Numenor, Tar Palantir, the second to last king, is dying. His daughter, who doesn't even make it to this, because she's not officially counted as a ruler of Numenor, because she gets that stolen from her by her cousin, who then forces her to marry him, and so on. With all of this, there is a story of where the Númenóreans are at. Instead, we just get introduced to them. Here they are. It's not even covering the Second Age at this point. It's covering the very end of the Second Age. You might as well say, okay, we're just going to come in and deal with the final bit that we find really interesting, that the writers could have said, because we don't find any of the rest of the Second Age interesting. But actually, there's a story behind why the Númenóreans end up being the way they are, and why Elendil and his sons and their families and the household and all the kind of the lords of the Adonai who go with them and their families and so on. The reason why you have this exile in Middle Earth all comes from everything that's gone before. All of the previous monarchs who completely destroyed everything that was originally created for them. So, in terms of the framing, actually the age thing is an important factor. The former monarchs that went before, that's actually a really important thing to setting the scene, regardless of the fact that they completely screwed with the timeline and decided to have Mordor created. Effectively, they've looked at creating it kind of 2,000 years late. Was it? No. Yeah, I think it's 2,000 years. But either way, multiple thousands of years later than it should have been created. And that's regardless of the stupidity of how they went about creating it. The homeless man creates Mordor kind of meme and things like that. It's that side of things you can't excuse either way, because that's just ridiculous. But the whole creation of Mordor timeline thing, even then, you can remove all of that. And you can say, well, okay, we're telling this story from a much later point, but actually you've missed what builds them up to that point. You've missed why Sauron has an issue with the Númenóreans. The whole reason Sauron has an issue with them is built up over time. And you're missing all of this build-up. So the former monarchs, the former rulers of Númenor, before Ar-Pharazôn at the end, before Tar Palantir, that's really important, because otherwise you have no real understanding of why these characters are doing what they're doing. Why Sauron hates Elendil. Why Elendil is seeking to be in Middle-earth. It's not just because of what goes on in his lifespan. It's what's come before. So that's the first part. Now, the second bit, we're going to be using this book, I believe, because there are it's really well done how they've done this. There are basically little sections for each of the rulers of Númenor, and for some of them it's fairly small. For example, Tar Ministir, he's got, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Well, no, actually, he's only got 6 lines. He's got 6 lines. And then there's a bit that comes in talking about stuff that's going on in Middle-earth. And then we get to Tar Kiriatan. Well, he's got effectively he's got 4 paragraphs, certainly 3 paragraphs that you can talk about. So, depending on which monarch it is and how much has been written about them in the various notes that Tolkien's done, because this is basically a compilation of all the notes that have been found, brought together and recognised in a coherent, or as coherent a storyline as is possible. And I'm going to be tying that in with another element of the Bible. So we've already looked at Genesis and how that comes into what I believe influenced Tolkien's writing. But there's also this bit. So have a look at this. So with this, we have 8 different parts of the Bible. You can see they're all from the books, the Book of Kings. For those that don't know, whilst in the Bible they are called 1 Kings and 2 Kings, they're actually all effectively only one book. It's just that they've been broken up into 2, I guess, for ease of reading. But in terms of how the original writers did it, it was all one book. And so we've got the first thing is about Baasha, king of Israel, and you'll see in the red circle it says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Then a little bit later, Jehu, son of Hanani, let's see, it talks about evil has been done in the eyes of the Lord again. Then again, did evil in the eyes of the Lord, that's Omri, I believe. Then you've got, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. So that's Ahab. Then we have Ahaziah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Moab revolts. Talks about Joram. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. and again did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So we've got all of those, and there are more. But I thought let's stick with 8, particularly as that's all that could fit within that particular image, and I don't want to start throwing loads and loads of images of this at you. But we have this image that's showing there is a clear message about the kings of Israel, and you also have this with the kings in Judah as well, that they do evil in the eyes of the Lord, and this eventually leads to them being sent into exile because God no longer protects them. Okay, so this is the biblical story. Again, regardless of whether you believe it or not, this is the biblical narrative that we have, and the understanding that is placed upon this particular story and storyline. So whether you're believing it to be true or fictitious or somewhere in between, doesn't matter. This is the understanding of the story. So here we've got the story. This is what it's talking about, of people doing evil in God's sight, and eventually they are removed. So one of the things that we see, and it's actually in the Silmarillion, is we see within the Akalabeth, it talks about all sorts of things that are a response to the Valar. So, for example, this is fairly early on. We're only, let's see, 2, 4, on page 7 of the Akalabeth. And the Akalabeth is, just looking at the front for how long. So the Akalabeth is 32 pages long. So page 7 of 32, okay, about a quarter of the way through, is that? Yeah, about a quarter of the way through. We have the line, "Why do the lords of the West sit there in peace unending, while we must die and go we know not whither, leaving our home and all that we have made? And the Eldar die not, even those that rebelled against the lords. And since we have mastered all seas, and no water is so wild or so wide that our ships cannot overcome it, why should we not go to Avalon and greet there our friends?" Avalon or Avalone, I can't remember offhand how you pronounce it, but that's Tol Eressëa. That's the one island historically back at before the First Age, when the elves were first transported over to Valinor. They were put on this island, and the island was pushed by one of the Valar, and that then was just off of the coast of Valinor. So the whole thing there is that they're saying, how come we can't go over there? Why do the Valar say? Because there is this thing called the Ban of the Valar, which means that they cannot sail so far west that they can no longer see Númenor. So that is their limitation. They are not allowed to go and live in the land of the Undying because they will die. They are not undying. They cannot go to the land of the Undying. That's the rule that's been put upon them. But they start to moan. They start to say, why can't we go there? Why shouldn't we be able to go there? We're so much better than everyone else that's human in Middle-earth. We live so long. Why can't we have even longer life, unlimited life, like the elves have? And this is something that leads to an eventual fall. Now, this is where I refer to the Fall of Númenor book, because one of the kings is called Tar Atanamir. Tar Atanamir, it describes him here as he was like his father, proud and greedy of wealth. And the Númenorians in his service exacted heavy tribute from the men of the coasts of Middle-earth. In his time the shadow fell upon Númenor, and the king and those that followed his law spoke openly against the ban of the Valar. And we then see this follows from Tar Tanemir onwards. And the king, it says, it was Tar Tanemir who first spoke openly against the ban and declared that the life of the Eldar was his by right. Remember, of course, the rulers of Numenor were descended from Eärendil, who was part elf, part human, and his two sons, Elrond and Elros. Elrond chose to be elf. Elros chose to be man, and so became the ruler of the Dunedain. So we start to see this rebellion, this going against the Valar, the equivalent of doing evil in God's sight. And this is something that then continues all the way through to the end of the Second Age. The whole point that Tolkien is making is if you go against God, then you put yourself in for doom. You're going to end up falling. And we see that as it goes through and through and through. You can continue to see throughout the rest of the Second Age, worse things happen. Eventually, you end up with the end point when Ar-Pharazôn. That's another point. Before we go into Ar-Pharazôn, originally they named themselves Tar, and then whatever their kingly name was. So Elros called himself Tar Miniatur. Tar was a high elven phrase that referred to king and kingship. And so all the way up till Tar Tanemir, you have the line of the line of kings calling themselves by their their elven title. But I believe I'm right saying it's Tanemir. He also starts to get an Aduniac or human name rather than using an elf name, which actually in a few generations' time, when we get to the run up to Ar-Pharazôn, you have Ar-Adunacor actually taking a fully Aduniac name, calling himself effectively he's calling himself the King of Men, I believe, with that title. So the whole thing with the kings of Numenor is that they had this title which was connecting themselves with the Valar, the Tar title, but they start to go for this Aduniac title, and this Aduniac title is one where they are saying, we're better than you, we know better, we no longer care what you want us to do, we want to do what we want to do. So the whole line that the Dunedain are going for is, we are our own masters, we don't care about what God says, effectively, because the Valar are effectively gods to the Dunedain. And we eventually get to this point with their falling away, that eventually with Tar-Pharazôn, spoilers in case you didn't already know this, but let's be honest, you've got the books there, it's not like this is unknown of, though that said, it may be that if Amazon do actually get to this point in the story before being cancelled, they might even tone this down somewhat. But you actually get when Pharazôn goes over to Middle-earth, he conquers Sauron, he takes away Sauron as a prisoner to Numenor, and eventually gets corrupted by Sauron, and Sauron turns Pharazôn into a worshipper of Morgoth. What we then see is all sorts of terrible things going on, including human sacrifice taking place in Numenor, where I believe, again, I could be wrong on this one, but I believe it talks about people from the faithful being captured and captured by the king's men, and that they were the ones generally that would be human sacrifices to Morgoth as part of all that's going on. The complete destruction Effectively, imagine comparing California in 1980 with California now, or San Francisco more specifically, shall we say, 1980 and 2023. The difference there, but it's such a turnaround. It's a complete destruction of the perfection that they were given. It's a complete abandonment of the values that they had with their forefathers. Obviously, being part of the three houses of the Edain, they fought against Morgoth, and now their descendants, 3,000 years plus later, they have rebelled against the Valar, and they're starting to worship Morgoth instead. Think about those who are descended from. Arendil is descended from Huor, the brother of Húrin. Húrin, who was captured by Morgoth. Húrin, whose children were cursed by Morgoth. His son ended up causing all sorts of destruction because of the curse that was put upon him. The fact that Húrin's son and daughter, because they didn't know each other, ended up marrying each other, all because of the curse that was put upon them. So it's not like there's no connection between some of the things that Morgoth did to the people in the First Age. Huge amounts of damage and destruction that were done to distant relatives of the kings of Númenor, and yet we see the king of Númenor openly worshipping Melkor, human sacrifices to Melkor, or Morgoth, I should say. It's just a complete abandonment of what they were given as the perfect life to live. And so again, the theology that we're seeing, going away from God, doing evil in God's sight, doing evil against the Valar, going against Ilúvatar. Indeed, the whole point when Númenor is brought down is that Manwë gives up his control over Middle-earth so that Ilúvatar is the one who destroys Númenor. So it's this abandonment of God that causes destruction and a removal from what was supposed to be perfection. Doing evil in the sight of God, doing evil in the sight of Ilúvatar. It's all tying in. And we see from that, the whole way that the story of Númenor is being told is a progressive deterioration of how they are living and what they are doing. It's that slow ebbing away from the perfection they were placed in. And this is another reason why not having the whole kind of timeline of the kings, starting with Elros being the first king and showing that ever so slight deterioration of things as things start to get worse and worse. They didn't have to show all of the different rulers, but they needed to show some of it, because the whole point is that by the time that we're introduced in the Rings of Power, when they introduce us to Númenor through Galadriel swimming there, yeah, like that's going to happen in real life. Well, Middle-earth real life, shall we say. The whole point being that we are meeting Númenor as far as the official storyline goes. We meet Númenor for the first time. It's already gone through all of this to take it to a negative. So all we really know is Númenor is a scummy hellhole. But no, there is something different. Instead we have a Númenor that was perfect, that was amazing. But we also have hope. And this is one final thing to point out. If you look back at the very first graph that I showed you, I referenced the fact that Tar Palantir is the one king that shows an increase once the decline happens in the age of the Númenorian kings. And this is because Tar Palantir is Hezekiah, or actually I'd say more likely he's Josiah. if you go to the Book of Kings, indeed, I think you probably have to be going to 2 Kings for this, you'll find that there are 2 kings of Judah who don't do evil in the sight or in the Lord's eyes. They don't go against God. Both of them end up doing some relatively silly things towards the end, but it's not about them going against God so much as just simply being a bit foolish. But you see, with both of them, there is an attempt to return to following God. We see a description of what goes on before they're in, where they talk about Asherah poles and child sacrifice and all sorts of bad things as the Israelites start to take up the worship of the various tribes around them, worshipping their gods rather than the God that had got them into the Promised Land. But when Hezekiah and Josiah come in, they start to turn things around. I think one of them isn't as good as the other at turning things around. I think it might be Hezekiah that doesn't tear down all the high places and Asherah poles, but Josiah does. And so there's this attempt to turn around. And in the same way, Tar-Palantir attempts to turn things around. There is this message of hope that there is a possibility that good can return. The problem is it can't return in the setting that's in. And this is the other thing that we see with the story in the Book of Kings. The story in the Book of Kings shows us that the Israelites are too far gone. There's no way that they can return back to how it was with King David, and Israel was all one nation and not divided into, and all this kind of stuff. There's no way it can do that, and actually there needs to be punishment. They need to be in exile, and they learn from their exile, and then they return to the Promised Land under Cyrus, I believe I'm right in saying. When you have a look again, turning this into the story of the Second Age, there's no way that the Númenóreans can turn around. Indeed, while Tar-Palantir is king, Pharazôn, not yet king, he becomes the leader of the king's men. He is still just as wicked as his grandfather, who was if I'm right, his grandfather is also Tar-Palantir's grandfather. I think that's where the break of the family lines go. But he becomes a leader within the king's men, still leading them away from the worship of Ra, even if, because he's not yet king and he hasn't yet got Sauron, he's not gone quite so over the edge as we see towards the very end. But he's still leading the vast majority of the thinking in Númenor as more and more people are turning away from the Valar. But there is hope that there could be a leader that doesn't. And that's the other story that we see. Tar-Palantir is a beacon of hope that Elendil then is when he follows the same worship of the Valar that Tar-Palantir does, and he sails away. And when he sails away, he's planting hope for worship of the Valar, for remembering the relationship that the Dunedain had with them as a result of the presence of Númenor. And in all of that whole understanding of things, it's completely washed away by not including it within the Rings of Power. And that's a huge miss. A, because it's such a fantastic story of the hope that you get. But B, if they're wanting to tie this into to Peter Jackson's films in some way, shape or form, of people actually thinking, okay, there's a connection there. The whole thing about Aragorn is he's given the name Estelle, which is hope. He is hope that there will be a return to the renewed kingdom, that he will be able to claim the kingship both of Arnor but also Gondor. the hope theme that travels through Tar Palantir, Elendil, and eventually Aragorn is a key part of what Tolkien is telling in this story. But the Rings of Power writers just completely threw it away. They didn't give it a second thought. And yet I'm fairly certain that if that had been the line that would have been gone through, if they'd have been focusing in on this idea of hope, of yes, things are going to go from being amazing at the start to, I would imagine, based on my my video on this is how they should have done it, the penultimate series would have ended in the destruction of Numenor, and so you get to that really low point. But you then have the upswing of, okay, they're safe in Middle Earth. Then you have the battle. Elendil will die, but there is this line going through. There's Valandil waiting for Isildur to return, and whether they showed the death of Isildur or not is irrelevant. But the whole point is that there's this line of hope. Valandil becomes the new line of hope for Arnor, and eventually his descendants lead to Aragorn, and the ultimate hope that is brought through in The Lord of the Rings. So hopefully that's given you at least a little bit of a grasp of where I think the theology is coming from. I mean, when I first was reading the Silmarillion, I couldn't believe just how much of a connection there was between how Tolkien was framing things for the Calibeth with Numenor and the story that we see in Kings, as well as also in the Ages in Genesis. And so I hopefully that's given you a bit of a better understanding and also hopefully a better appreciation for some of the influences that Tolkien had. I mean, I've got to be honest, I would love to be able to have a conversation with a Roman Catholic who would have a bigger understanding of some of the influences within Tolkien's writing, because I'm going just on the biblical stuff. I mean, I'm an Anglican, I'm a Protestant worshipper, so I don't know some of the more intricate elements of Catholicism to be able to judge one way or the other, whether there's any references to rosary or any of that other stuff. So it'd be really interesting to have a conversation with a Roman Catholic about that. But hopefully, at the very least from a biblical perspective, you'll have gained a little bit of an understanding and appreciation for some of the influences that led to what Tolkien created. So I will leave it there. Hopefully you didn't get too bored with the graphs. And yeah, I will, if nothing else, because obviously my videos for my walks are now on Rumble, because YouTube's algorithm keeps on wanting to allow false claims on the music that's being used in the videos. So the only videos I'm likely to be putting up are going to be silly little meme type videos of stuff that I do in church, or when the next series comes out, which I believe is close to finishing filming. So yeah, that might end up being at some point at the beginning of next year, depending on how their editing goes. So there will be videos. When they happen, who knows? But either see them here on YouTube and obviously Rumble, because this will be copied over there as well, or just go to Rumble for whenever I do my walks, which is usually once a week, if you like those videos. But I shall leave it there for now.